Hi, and welcome to the Keys to Therapy. Today's episode, we have Holly as our guest. Hello, Holly.
Hey, Samantha, thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for being here. So, can you introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Holly, and I am a master's level psychologist here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I specialize in working with kids and adults doing psychological testing and evaluation for educational related issues, whether that be dyslexia, ADHD,
Mm.
attention concerns, giftedness, the whole nine yards, and also looking at doing therapy with kids and adults. Anxiety, really a big focus of mine, as well as parent training. So that's a little about me.
Awesome. Yeah, so wide range of ages and different issues. And well,
Yes.
it's
That
great.
I like to mix it up.
Yeah, it keeps it interesting.
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
Well, tell me what made you decide to become a therapist? What was your journey to get here?
Yeah. So I've always been a very relational person. I really just enjoy people. I am a people person. I'm an extrovert. I really love people and their stories. So I've always been very inquisitive. I have been just always invested in people's stories and really wanting to know more to connect with people on that deeper level. Certainly, that AP Psych class in high school helped out a lot of just me really connecting with the material and wanting to explore more about psychology and what that looks like and how our lives can be impacted and family of origin and all of that.
Mm.
um, and then I went on to college and started taking psychology elective courses and really fell in love with the material, became more involved, and started asking questions, met other therapists, declared my major as psychology, joined the Honor Society. Also, I participated in group therapy in college. So, being a client myself was a really helpful experience, kind of going through that college life, all the stressors, all
Yeah.
the ups and downs, and having a supportive group of people and going through that in group therapy really solidified my choice and played a pivotal role in my career choice. So I think, yeah, just always wanting to work with others. When I was little, I wanted to be a teacher.
Oh,
Um, and it's involved later in life just to becoming a psychologist, which is allows me to have that teaching role in a
mhm.
one-on-one setting, being able to teach skills and ways to even inform students in the educational setting. So maybe not being a teacher, but being able to do the evaluations and help teachers better educate their students on based on the results of the evaluations.
Yeah, and I feel like there'd be a lot of kids that you see that need that help when it comes to school. I mean, that's probably why a lot of them get the
Yes.
evaluations is because the school setting or system's not working for them. So I feel like you get to be that go-between to really make school a better, happy, healthier experience for them and help the teachers
Right.
maybe be able to know how to best help the kids.
Most definitely. And it's not a one size fits all approach. I think a lot of
Right.
teachers, especially after COVID, and
Yeah.
is there a learning gap? Does this student have a learning disability? Is it, hey, we just need to kind of transition and adjust back into the real world for a couple of years. And so really playing a piece in that process to help uncover and kind of tease apart those issues.
Yeah, that's got to be a big help.
Yeah, I enjoy it. It's kind of like a puzzle that I'm helping to put the pieces together.
Yeah, and then you get to see the results too, which is
Yes. Yeah.
helpful.
And making the recommendations for, okay, here may be these diagnostic impressions, but now what? Like the journey really starts after the evaluation.
Yeah, so you get to put people on the right path and help them get what they need.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot of different master's programs, right? Like mine's different than yours, different than some other people's paths. So, what made you choose the master's program that you did and that licensing path?
Absolutely. So I was in the clinical health psychology program at App State, and this was really stood out to me as such a rigorous, challenging program, I will say, but also one that's going to provide such great training and
Mm,
experience. And so we had a small cohort of 8. So
that
there
is
were just
small.
8 of us. It was very competitive. Like I said, very challenging and rigorous.
Mhm.
could be competitive at times. So I will say grad school, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love the program at App State. It was challenging. Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah.
We
So go ahead.
had we had a great cohort. We had great relationships with our professors. We would do trainings with them, or go out to dinner or happy hours, and so they really made an effort to connect with us and make the experience as enjoyable as it possibly could, despite all of the kind of different facets of being in grad school, in addition to the coursework.
Yeah, and it is a lot. Grad school is like super heavy.
For sure.
Um, so why the psychology route? Because I know that I mean, there could be social work, there's counseling programs,
Mhm.
clinical mental health counseling. Did you know that testing was something that you wanted to do? Because I know that's something that sets psychologists apart from some of the other
Mhm.
licenses.
That's right. Yeah. And that's one of the big things that sets psychologists apart from other mental health professionals. And that's actually something that I discovered along the way. I wasn't
Yeah.
quite sure even about testing really until I became a grad student at App State. So I
Oh.
really fell in love with it. That first semester, we had a cognitive assessment course where you learn about the IQ testing, the achievement testing. To become proficient in those tests, we had to find volunteers of undergraduate college students who were like, sure, we'll sign up. You can test my IQ. Of course, we didn't give them those scores. We kind of gave them a summary letter because we were still graduate students and under supervision. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, testing it became a passion of mine along the way. I was able to, after that first year, become a TA for the course for the students that were a year younger than me, and be able to assist with that. And really, just from here on out, it's been a love and a passion of mine.
Yeah, and it's cool because again, there's so many other licenses that can't
Mm,
access those, don't have the training in that. So we
yeah,
definitely need people who have it.
absolutely.
So with grad school, what do you think were some of the best parts or like the best things you learned or classes you had? And what were some of the things that
Mhm.
maybe you could have used more of?
Yeah, that's a good question. We had, so on top of the classes, we saw clients in addition, as well as doing a graduate assistantship.
Jeez.
So we had a lot on our plates. So I don't know that I could have used a lot more of anything, to be honest with
Yeah.
you, because we had kind of the whole 9 yards, right? We had our full coursework. We were seeing clients who volunteered at the counseling center to work with us in more of a supportive counseling role.
Okay.
Our testing cases, and then I was a research assistant for one semester and a TA for another semester. So being able to earn some money along the way. So certainly, I think, like I've said, I keep bragging on the program, but high quality training. I don't.
Mhm.
I think we could have used a little bit more, like a course on some cultural competence and
Mhm.
diversity, and treating, different populations would be really helpful. We definitely had the ethics courses
Mhm.
and all the assessment courses, and interventions, multiple classes on therapy modalities, but I would
Mhm.
have liked to see even some elective courses, which we probably wouldn't have had a ton of time for, but to be able to look into addiction, or look into, again, cultural competency, how to work with even more diverse testing cases.
Mm.
So it's after grad school that you kind of do a lot of that learning, kind of on your own or through some CEUs to find your niche.
Yeah, and then that brings me actually to my next question, which is what was life like after grad school? Like what was the first job you
Yeah.
had? Did you have to have a certain number of like hours to get your license and things like that?
Yes. So during grad school, we had to do two separate practicum courses and then an internship. And then we would graduate, and then you're in the real world. So my practica experience, the first one was at the counseling center at App State, working with college students, loved it.
Mhm.
And then round two was the Appalachian State Psychology Clinic. and that was working with students who wanted an evaluation. Maybe they were struggling in their college courses, wanted to look into accommodations. And then my internship was back here in Charlotte. So I moved from Boone back to Charlotte, and did private practice here. So after private practice internship, I graduated, stayed in private practice. It's a little bit of a non-traditional pace.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks upon, graduating, they may join a community mental health agency or may want to work in a hospital or a larger group. And so going into private practice really has been my dream from the beginning. And it was great to be able to execute that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have a question because I know that sometimes some people say something about like paying your dues in community mental health, but
Mhm.
then a lot of times those places burn people out. And sometimes before they've
Yeah,
even got their license, they're questioning if they should be in the field. So there's kind of pros and cons to both situations. So, what do you think were some of the pros and cons for you as far as going into private practice right after?
sure. So definitely a pro for me was being able to have that autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
Flexibility of private practice for me is it just suits my personality. It is a way for me to really be able to say, these are the clients that I want to work with. These are the
Mm-hmm.
clients that I have expertise in working with. And I get to kind of have the flexibility with rates and time off. I don't have to say, hey, boss, can I have the third week in July off? I'm able to make that decision independently. So going straight into private practice was a great fit for my personality, and really for my work style. So I think that's important to know about yourself, as
Yeah.
after graduation. Now, I will say I did pay my dues for community mental health for a short period of time, but this was before graduate school. So in undergrad, I attended UNC Charlotte. I
Mhm.
had the opportunity to do a practicum course, and I really wanted some experience in working in community mental health. I think it's important to work with a wide variety of populations. So I worked at Intervision, which is a psychosocial rehabilitation program in
Ah.
uptown Charlotte.
Mhm.
And really, they focus on working with clients who have more of that severe and persistent mental health concerns. So, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar, um, and helping those clients maybe that don't have as many accesses or resources to insurance or
Yeah.
community offerings. And so being able to work there were a lot of pros and there were definitely cons. Pros would be the great experience in working with a diverse population,
Mhm.
being able to see a wide range of folks with various mental presentations and getting my feet wet. We had a lot of fun too. There was karaoke and talent shows
Ah.
and a fitness group, and so I was able to really lead some groups and activities and had a lot of fun there. I will say cons can be pretty disorganized at times
Mhm.
in community mental health. I don't want to make a blanket statement, but I found it to be a bit disorganized at times, or hey, what were we supposed to do today, or oh,
Yeah.
the schedule got kind of rearranged. So also some high turnover, and to your point earlier, the burnout.
Yeah.
And the clients really felt it when, hey, we just got used to, Miss Kim and she's gone. She's
Mhm.
only been here for 2 or 3 months. So I think those were some of the cons. And that also solidified, okay, I've got my community mental health,
Mhm.
experience there, and it solidified, I think I want to go into private practice. So that's kind of how I landed in private practice.
Yeah, and that's good too because it's like you had the background to be able to say, "Okay, here's where I've worked. Here's different, disorders I've worked with. Here's different ages, different populations," to really then narrow down later on where you wanted to
Definitely.
be, which
Definitely.
is
And,
helpful.
of course, private practice has some cons.
Mhm.
I would say if someone doesn't really love the business side of things, where, maybe involving insurance companies if you choose to
Yeah.
accept insurance, or The aspect of charging a cancellation fee, that can be a con in a lot of
Mhm.
ways for people. Now, there are certainly ways to offset that by hiring an office manager, a virtual assistant, or some sort of middle person to offset that. But I would say that that can be a con. And if you want more experience with acute care populations, I would say private practice may not be the right space for you.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times folks who need more care often can't find themselves in a regular cadence of coming to private practice, whether it's transportation or
Mhm. Their
being able to
job.
remember the appointments, their job, all of that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's usually more of people who are on like the higher functioning side or have more
Mhm.
resources that can do private practice. But I
Definitely.
mean, there's resources for everybody. So it's like, if you're at one stage of your life, then it's community mental health might be the place you go. And at another stage, it would be more private practice. So
Yeah,
makes
certainly.
sense. So what trainings or books you've read or, any extra education that you've taken since graduation that has helped you maybe feel like a more competent therapist, feel stronger in your field?
Yeah. I think training in crisis management is so
Mm,
crucial. Being able to assess for suicidal risk, knowing when we need to create a safety plan.
mhm,
Even though you may not market for those specific clients, or maybe chronic suicidality or self harm may not be your area of expertise, being
mhm,
able to have training so that because it you may not market to those clients per se, but they will come,
yeah,
whether that be, at the intake, things might be pretty stable, but during the course of treatment, sometimes that can kind of pop up. And so being able to have those materials
mhm,
ready and prepared and know what to do if a client is saying, "Hey, I don't feel safe," or "I am thinking of harming myself," being able to know when is it recommended to get a further assessment at the hospital, or contacting a parent if you work with
mm.
folks who are under 18.
That's a
So I
really good point.
yeah,
Yeah, because I feel like, especially for newer therapists, that's one of the scariest things. I mean, it's scary for people who've even been established in their career if they don't have the right training. But when you're a newer therapist, I feel like most times you kind of go towards like worst case scenario.
yeah,
And that tends to be it. What if someone's in my office or I'm having a virtual appointment with them and they're expressing this? What do I do? So I think that's a really good point of getting that type of training. So maybe you're not panicked and possibly like escalating the situation.
absolutely. And in grad school, we had the opportunity to do lots of role play experiences. So with
Mm,
our fellow cohort members, being able to really practice what you're going to say and what you're going to do, because we may be able to know kind of in theory how we want to respond, but
yeah.
when the moment comes and when the emotions are high and you might start to be feeling that fight or flight, sometimes it can be a freeze moment. So
Right.
really being prepared with the tools is a huge recommendation that I would have for someone just starting out.
Yeah. Again, really good point. Cause sometimes it might be like I think in my grad school program, maybe a chapter of one book that talked about that. And that was kind of it. Everything else was sort of like you or somebody else in the internship or place that you worked would have that come up and then you would discuss it. There wasn't a lot of
Right.
like preemptive stuff. So
Right.
that's really scary when that's happening and you have to just like be there for that client, but also say, I don't really know what to do or how to create the safety plan. So having templates, having
Oh,
training, like practicing with somebody, like
right.
getting the language down, that would be very helpful and probably help a lot with confidence on the therapy side as well.
And certainly, relying on your supervisor and being able to consult and lean on them when you need to as well is really
Yeah.
important. I always or also would recommend taking trainings in areas that you may not specialize in. So, for
Mm,
example, for me, I don't work with clients who have eating disorders. That's not an
mhm,
area that I specialize in or have a particular large amount of knowledge in, but I've still taken trainings in working with clients and assessing for eating disorders so that I know when to refer, who to refer to, what level of care. So that's just one example, but it could be someone who's presenting with some features of addiction.
Mhm.
Hey, what do I do? Who do I refer to? What's an LCAS? Being able
Yeah.
to know, okay, maybe I'm not an LCAS, but I at least know what that is so that I can familiarize myself with those folks in the community to make an appropriate referral. So taking trainings in areas that you may not even specialize in to be able
Mhm.
to be a good resource for your clients.
Yeah, and that's another good point, and I think LCAS, for the baby therapists, I don't know, it's like substance abuse specialist, but,
Yeah,
being able to even make possibly, now that you say that, like a referral list as well for different people within the community
yes,
who maybe specialize in things that you don't, so you know where to
right.
connect people to the right services. But I like that because I think a lot of times people only take trainings in the areas that they want to learn more about
And
for
of
their
course
own
do
goals.
that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
like, you wanna be proficient in anxiety or
yeah,
whatever it is that's your thing, but, I think that that assessment piece is huge because sometimes clients will present with, like, certain, like, self-harming behaviors or restrictive eating, and there's things that could be on that border, and if you don't know what the criteria really is, you won't know if you should or shouldn't keep them on, or when that point is of, "All right, this is past, like, my scope of practice."
exactly.
So, I like that, it's very good advice.
I would also say these aren't trainings, but networking is
Mm.
my favorite thing. As an extrovert, I know that, some folks may be more introverted or even kind
Mhm,
of on the ambivert side, but I think I can't stress networking enough. I really at the beginning of my practice made that a priority, and I will say it certainly has paid off in the relationships in the community that I've built. It's
mhm.
how we got to know each other,
Yeah.
being able to know who can I refer to? Who are my
Mhm,
fellow therapists? And it doesn't have to be I'm going to go, to a group of 50 people and give a speech and do a training. It can be I'm setting up a coffee date with someone one-on-one, or
mhm,
we're doing a Zoom meeting for 15 minutes. So being able to at your comfort level network with other therapists, visit different practices if you
mhm,
are an in-person therapist, learn about their setup. What's their lighting? Do they have a whiteboard? Do they work with kids? What are some books that they have? Being
mhm.
able to really tune in to the offices and the therapists around you in your community, I found to be huge.
Oh, definitely, and I think there's something, I know I felt this, and I think a lot of newer therapists do in the beginning, where you almost feel like you need to seem like you know everything.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want anyone to know what I don't know. You may not even know what you don't know, but that imposter syndrome really sets in. And so it feels like you, in some situations, you might have to kind of work with everybody, any client that comes in the door, any situation that you see, or you don't really know how to say no or who to refer to or who to even consult with about a specific issue. So I think you're right, like building up that support system, that networking community, I think both personally and professionally, it can be extremely helpful.
Yeah, and you mentioned personally, I think being a therapist, really that's why I love having therapists as friends, because
Mhm.
you guys get it.
Seriously.
You understand that care and that concern for the client, and being able to really connect on that deeper level. And so I
Mhm.
find it really valuable to have not only therapists as colleagues and to network with and refer to, but in my personal life to have empathetic, loving,
Mhm.
knowledgeable people as friends.
Yeah, and I think you, like you said, deeper relationships, if I meet somebody who's a non-therapist, the initial conversations tend to be more like, "What kind of food do you like?" Where when you meet a therapist, it's like, "What's your childhood trauma? Like, tell me the dirt. Let's get in. Like, let's do
Yeah,
this." And you
exactly.
get closer faster. But I think it also is like very real. And we also understand there's like a language we all speak of, like, "Oh gosh, I had 6 clients today." And it's like, wow, it's a lot.
Right.
Or someone else might be like, "Oh, you only worked 6 hours today?"
Right. Lucky you. Yeah. But
Right.
we're holding a lot of space for people, and
Yeah.
the work that we can do is very heavy and very,
Mhm.
very emotional, and being an active listener for 6 hours is a lot.
It's a lot, yeah, because most people at their jobs, they can just, like, have a snack whenever, get up and go to the bathroom, they can check their phones. We
Right.
are on for that entire hour.
That's a very good point, and I think sometimes it can be a bit misunderstood in our field. And that's why my jaw drops when some client or some therapists say, I saw 8 people today. I'm like, "Ooh, bless you. Like,
Yeah.
let's go home and get you in the bath." Like,
Right. Don't talk the rest of the day.
exactly.
Yeah, so that's another one too. You can kind of gauge what other
Mhm.
people's, like what their preferences are, what their boundaries are. And that's really helpful too as a new therapist is like you may have gotten this one form of doing things from school, or here's
Right.
this like textbook way, but the real world doesn't work that lined up. Like some of these like role play examples or book examples that may happen. So, or even like sometimes the community, I think for the most part, I've found that people are very accepting. It's not super competitive or
Right.
I don't know, people aren't like this is my stuff. Most people
Yeah.
are pretty welcoming.
Exactly. Oh, you can't, put your practice next to mine, it has to non-compete. And, you
Yeah.
know, yeah, I haven't found that to be the case here in Charlotte. I really love this community. And my hope is for all of the new therapists out there that they can also find that community to plug into, because I
Mhm.
think if you are in private practice, it can be isolating
Yeah.
if you don't have that peer group, consultation group, supervisor, people who are really going to be on your side, on your team.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's yeah, definitely in private practice too. And in the beginning stages, like you need to be able to bounce stuff off of people who get it. So
That
well, my last question is what do you wish you knew earlier in your career? Is there anything that maybe would have helped you when you were first starting out or anything that you've incorporated into your life now that would have helped you back then?
Yeah, a few things I thought of. One being people heal at their own pace. So
Mm,
I think when we're in grad school, we're very focused on the interventions, and this is supposed to, bring about this outcome. And if it doesn't bring the outcome in whatever kind of time frame that we have in our minds, we can start to get frustrated. But
mhm,
really, it's been helpful for me to know that, I need to meet my clients where they are. And so some clients may be super motivated. Let's go. Give me all the reading material, what are some outside resources that I can plug into? And other
mhm,
clients are more in that contemplation stage where they're kind of discovering and exploring and searching, and they're not really sure if they're ready to prepare to take action. So I think meeting your clients where they are, and also this has been really big for me to realize my success is not defined by the outcomes of my clients.
that's a
So
big one.
yeah, of course I care and I want them to receive, quality interventions, and we're
Mhm,
going to do a lot of good work together. But ultimately, I can't control the outcome. I can't control if they're going to use the tools or if they are going to take away something from our sessions. And so I think as therapists, if we only based our success on our client outcomes, sometimes it can feel discouraging
oh,
because
yeah.
we may have those clients who, for whatever reason, it just takes a little while longer to see some progress or to see that light bulb moment. So just realizing that my success is, how can I do all I can do as a therapist on my end, all that I can control, and then letting go and letting them have their own process has been helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because I feel like sometimes, especially when you're fresh out of school and you're used to being graded for the stuff
Mhm.
you've done or said, then you kind of feel like your client success is your grade. Like, how well did I do that? Oh, they did their homework. Okay, so that's like an A plus for me too because they listened and it helped them. And but there's going to be the clients who no show or
Yeah.
they decide you're not a good fit or whatever else is happening. They come in there talking about the same things every time, but you're not seeing that progress yet, and that can feel like we're doing something wrong.
Right. And also, knowing like I can't work harder than my clients are willing to work,
Mhm.
right?
For sure.
Because there are times where, I have put in a lot of effort and I want to put in that effort and I care about that client and their journey. However, if they're not ready, if they're not putting in the work, I can't heal for them and I
Mhm.
can't work harder than what they're willing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, because definitely been the beginning of my career, at least, it felt like, I don't know, I would spend a lot of time researching things and like going above and beyond in certain ways. And then some of the time it was for nothing. Like the client wasn't ready to take all these resources I was giving them, or they weren't in a place to do some of the homework or read the book or whatever it was that we talked about. And so, I started to learn later on to like, hey, if I've got these things, if you want them, and then sit back. And
Yeah.
that's been hard.
And it's almost, kind of something that I teach my clients to do is, asking for permission to
Mhm.
share or asking for permission to, would you like to hear my thoughts on that or some
Mhm.
feedback? And so I've, used that as well in my practice of, are you open to hearing some feedback or would you like a tool or a resource? And sometimes they're like, you know what, not today. And okay,
Mhm.
that's fine. But being able to say, I'm going to meet you where you're at. If you're ready for me to give you a reading resource or for me to ask you to do this homework assignment, I want to challenge you, but I also want it to be useful and worth your time.
Mhm. Right. Because if they're not willing to do, then what's the point? Like, or if they're faking it for us, what's the
Right?
point? So I like that technique, like being able to ask them, like, can I share this with you or may I share it with you? I think that that's helpful. And it also puts it back on them to
Mhm.
decide which path they want to go on and not have us just constantly lead. So
Right. Right.
it's awesome.
Another thing too that I, wish I would have known earlier in my career. I think there's this myth that gets promoted sometimes that therapists don't make money and,
Mm,
you're overworked and you're underpaid and, oh my goodness, you're doing all of this and you're really barely scraping by. And I found that to be a myth. I think as a therapist, you can make a good living for yourself. And I've
oh, yeah.
certainly found that to be the case. It doesn't go without hard work, of course,
Mhm.
but being able to say, you know, if I'm aligned in my goals and my values and setting my fees and setting up a schedule that works for me, I can make a good living as a therapist. And it can feel fair to myself and fair to my clients.
Oh, yeah, and you said something earlier about, like, vacation time, like,
Mhm.
being able to say, like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna just take this time off," and that's not the case in either, of certain settings or, for some people, their job doesn't work for their life,
Right.
and they prioritize the job, but then their life suffers, so eventually their job suffers too. So, it sounds like being able to prioritize that work-life balance, including the financial piece, which is huge, like, we don't get extra points for suffering ourselves. It doesn't like make us a better therapist in some way. And
Yeah.
there is kind of this martyr complex I've noticed
Mhm.
amongst people in this field or what we're taught sometimes in school.
Mhm.
So it's like, you're not going to make money, but you're going to really have a good heart by helping people. It's like, why can't I have both?
Rewarding.
Let me get both. Like, what? So,
Absolutely. And you can have both guilt free, and
yes.
I heard this quote one time and it was, I think paraphrasing it, it was, money is an exchange of energy, right?
Mm,
So if I am putting energy into working with a client and they're going to then pay me a fee and it's an exchange of energy and time, and so really looking at it from an abundance perspective versus a scarcity perspective. So in the beginning of my career, yeah, there were times where before a phone call or before a consultation with a client, a potential new client, I would be rehearsing my fee, you
hmm
know being able to say confidently, here's my rate, and not, justifying it or saying, well, if you need a sliding scale, right?
hmm
Certainly there are clients that qualify and I've given sliding scale, but being able to say confidently, here's my rate. And then
hmm
if they want to explore other options, opening that conversation. But I think that's been, that was helpful to practice and kind of get more confident in your choices as a therapist.
Yeah, and money was never discussed in my grad school program as
Mhm.
far as like, here's how you talk about money.
Yeah,
Here's what kind of money to expect to get paid at certain stages of your career.
yeah.
Here's things you should be advocating for when it comes to your salary. None of that was ever
Yeah,
spoken about.
agreed. Agreed. So a lot of this, is again your own learning post grad school, and it is a learning curve. And that's
Yep.
why, I believe it's so important to have a community and have other therapists as mentors, to ask questions, to say,
Mhm,
is this a reasonable rate? Is this, does this seem fair?
mhm.
Just someone to bounce ideas off of.
Oh, definitely. And that's part of why I wanted to create this platform is because there's a lot that's not talked about in
Right.
school. And there's a lot of people who I think all think it's only them going through some of these fears, some of these insecurities, some of these like gaps in knowledge. And it's not, it's the majority of us. And it's funny as I'm talking more people hearing so many similar experiences, especially about like what some personal aspects of life were not talked about in our programs. Everything was about the client, but there was not a lot of stuff about what we should be doing for ourselves as therapists to be a better therapist
Yeah.
personally, not just professionally.
And I think kind of as my career has moved along, being able to know that the business aspect and the organizational aspect of things certainly can be flexible, right?
Yeah.
So there may be a time in someone's career where they say, all right, I'm not going to see clients on Fridays. I'm going to
Uh-huh.
do admin time or note writing or writing reports. And so being able to schedule all of that into your week, because while we may have direct hours with clients, there's certainly a lot of indirect hours that we have
Oh yeah.
writing notes, writing reports, making phone calls, sending emails, and just
Mhm.
really having boundaries, not only with your clients, but with your own time and being able to turn that email off, turn those
Yes.
notifications off on your weekend or after 5. Otherwise, it can start to drive you crazy.
Right. So it's like, go live your life. Like you deserve it. And again, that martyr
Model what you
complex.
tell your clients.
Exactly. Yeah. Cause otherwise we're all a bunch of hypocrites out here. And, I've seen therapists. I mean, this is a field where I think there's a really high rate of burnout that doesn't exist as strongly, it feels like, in like the dental profession or like some other aspects of medical.
Yeah.
And I think that's because we feel like we are so involved with our clients. We have to, there's such a personal relationship. We spend so much time with them, but there needs to be those boundaries in place to save your time, your energy, or that burnout's going to happen at some point.
And that's how you can preserve your skills and your quality of life
Mhm.
to be able to recharge and be the best therapist that you can be. And I think it's so important to really model that.
Yeah, that's a great point, especially like you were saying about the 8 clients. Like I know if it's past 6 for me at this point, I'm like, I don't, it's not even fair to the 7th or 8th one for me because I won't be the same level I was for the first.
Sure.
So,
Absolutely. And those are things along the way, I think, that newer
mhm,
therapists will discover. Being able to say, is my max 4 or 5 a day? And that's
mhm.
okay. We all have different thresholds. And so what may work for one person isn't going to work for the next. And so trying not to compare too much in that area, because it's really what works best for you and what's the best to take care of yourself.
Exactly, including what time of day you work, if possible, if you work at a flexible place, and if not, find yourself a flexible place as your career goes on, or create your own flexible place. But yes, very good lessons and all things that I think we got were gaps in knowledge in our grad school programs. So,
Agree. Yeah.
well, thank you so much for being a guest today and for sharing so much. I think it's really helpful for people to learn some of the lessons, hopefully earlier than we learned them, the kind of
Yeah.
hard way.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
yeah, I really appreciate it. So, if anybody wants to follow anything that Holly's got going on, there's going to be her website, some contact info below the video. And if you want to continue to follow the channel and see what's coming down the pike, then subscribe below. But other than that, thank you again.